Yes.
Dan ben ik de muse en def bij deze.
Oké, super. Oké, what is the sorriest thing that enters hell? Not any of the sins. Rossetti, Act 1, Ballet of the Nations. There's no place, nowhere, a street widening to a square forms flanking pieces to a building on whose octave is inscribed in immense letters. The world. A theatre of varieties, lessee and manager Satan. The front of the theatre consists almost entirely of one colossal door, now closed, but which, being opened, allows the whole interior to be seen from the flight of steps leading up to it. To the right of the theatre, the house of self-interest, with a shiny door plate and knocker. To the left, a rack and bottle shop half closed, belonging to Widow Fear. A few adjacent houses forming a flanking semicircle to the theatre, with large door plates inscribed truthfulness, justice, temperance, equanimity, etc., whose owners are seen yawning at the windows and then crossing the square after looking on warily and disappearing by a side door into the theatre. What these sleepy virtues are, languidly watching, is a group of human passions, with hand barrows busily unloading their instruments and desks and carrying them up to steps to an unseen stage door in the rear of the theatre. Each of these passions, attired in appropriate allegoric garments, bears his or her name on a silver badge, hung around the neck by a chain. Greed, loyalty, discipline, comradeship, jealousy, egotism, bullying, ennui, boredom, and others. Some very handsome and with a family resemblance to the sleepy virtues. Others hideous and sluttish, or with grotesque attempts to hide their ugliness and mean appearance, or monstrous affliction of dignity. When all the instruments and desks have been carried into the theatre, a little body of these passions return and join in carrying up the steps a carved hand railing or balustrade intended to separate the orchestra from the stalls, and bearing in ornamental letters the words patriotism, reserved for members of the orchestra. All this is being done under the impatient superintendence of ballet master Deaf, who fusses around and occasionally conceals his watch. Ballet master Deaf is seen at first only from the back, a long lank figure in loose black evening clothes, long tailcoat, with a long pianist head of hair round a bald shiny patch. There is something extraordinary, angular, and unaccountably uncanny in his figure and movement, but it is only when he turns full round that we become aware that he is a skeleton, and that the grey head of hair surmounts a grinning skull. Then we wonder that we did not notice that his hands and feet, both bare and protruding from ever over short sleeves and trousers, are skeleton also. A few neutral nations wearing armlets inscribed neutrality look shyly at these proceedings, pretending to be examining the facades of the surrounding houses and the contents of their own pockets. Afraid of getting mixed up in the performance, but enormously attracted by it. After this dumb show has gone on a little while, Ballet Master Deaf, showing more and more impatience, a slight earthquake rocks the theatre and adjacent buildings, causing the various personas to stop short in whatever they are doing. And as it rumble subsides, the earth yawns at the foot of the theatre steps, and Satan arises majestically, helping the muse of history out of the depths, and followed by the classic and unsubstantial chorus of ages to come. The earth closes after them. The place which with the earthquake had become suddenly dark is lit by the sinister luminescence emanating from Satan's archangelic person, until the whole is suffused with a strange and ominous light, as if of a fog, in which near objects are oddly visible and others shade away into nothingness. The evil passions fall on their knees. The passions who are deemed respectable retire hurriedly. Ballet Death, for the first time turning fully round and revealing his skeleton nature, bows very low, one hand on his white waistcoat. Satan, grasping him by the hand. At last, we meet again, dear Ballet Master Death. We need not introduce you to our old friend Cleo, muse of history by profession, but may I say it, by preference and true vocation, dramatic critic. She is a great lover of our joint shows, and has graciously undertaken a full account of this. I trust our finest one?
I have had the pleasure of meeting you 2 or 3 times before, but one can't expect so busy an artist as Ballet Master Def to bear in mind all his many admirers. No, that indeed he can't, ma'am. There is far too much to do in the world, and a fearful lot of arrears. Come, my lord. Time presses, and we shall never get our orchestra together. All these human passions have grown so lackadaisical of late.
Alright. Give me a list of the performers, or rather, I am sure the muse will kindly help us in our roll call, but are all the dancing nations in readiness?
Oh, forever so long. They are already behind the curtain, practicing their steps and settling their headpieces comfortably on their shoulders, which is never easy. They are all right, and so is the audience. The neutral nations have taken their seats. It's the orchestra troubles me.
Looking rudely over the shoulder of the muse, who is holding the list handed her ceremoniously by Satan. All these, dabbing his skeleton finger on it, have still to come. Oh, wacht, ben jij?
All these have still to come. Confound them all for an idle, vapouring, bloodless, fiddle-faddling lot. Mankind has coddled its passions up to late years, or fed them on humanitarian water gruel, till you can't recognise the inane wretches.
Oh, that's quite easily mended. Once the performance is in full swing, dear Ballet Master Deaf, then it's brandy for heroes, eh? Come, I will help you call them. Knocks loudly and repeatedly at the door to the right. Hello, you there? Are you deaf or asleep? The muse, rising from a packing case onto which Satan had politely bid her to be seated, and where she had been conning the list of performers, and following Satan.
Forgive my indiscretion. I want my notes to be as full as possible. Who is it you are calling, my lord?
Self-interest, a most industrious fellow, but unluckily not much addicted to such artistic pleasure as our shows. It is he who, on weekdays, plays unremittingly the ground bass of life. Satan still knocks more loudly. Zou die doen? Self-interest heard from within. This is a half holiday. Call tomorrow. I'm a trade unionist, and can't break the rules. I must have my sleep out. Let me see. What was I dreaming about? Ah, yes, to be sure, drowsily. The coming reconstruction of society on a more rational. Death shaking his skeleton fist at the house of self-interest.
Confound your insolence! Is that a way to answer Satan and death? But self-interest was always a dull dog. Not a spark of divine fire to be struck out of him. Your lordship need not have wasted your time and mine in calling on such a gross modern materialist.
May I point out that your skeleton is not just a trifle testy? Don't you see, excellent but short-sighted Ballet Master Death, that knocking at self-interest's door has brought fear, and that over-retiring slut to her window? Hi, Widow Fear! It's only a couple of old friends inviting you to a little entertainment. The muse writing on her tablets, while what she is describing is seen happening by the spectator.
So, Fear, squalid beyond all other passions, came down, hesitating just a little, because she had heard self-interest refuse the invitation. But she was speedily dragged along by her shabby, restless twins, Suspicion and Panic, and the family carried penny whistles and foghorns and a cracked storm and massacre bell, German medieval, but wrapped in yesterday's Daily Mail and Globe.
Satan to the Muse. Rather an unpresentable lot, though first-rate performers. I hope we have something really handsome. A few genuine virtues to make up for them, since the nations have grown detestably superfine of late, and some of the other indispensable members of our orchestra aren't very attractive either. Ah, the very thing, goes forward to meet the two newcomers. I am enchanted that you deign to join our amateur band, small but very choice and famous under the name of patriotism. My dear Lady Idealism and my brilliant young Prince Adventure. He rustles his wings in ceremonious salutation to the newcomers. The muse rises ever looking around.
And idealism and adventure, bride and bridegroom, having come out of their palace of cloud and sunbeams and rainbow, went up into the theatre. Very magnificent they were, and of noblest bearing, if a little overdressed. Idealism carried a silver trumpet, and adventure a woodland horn.
Sin and her crew slink in.
There came also Death's mother, or wife, for their family relations are primitive and best not inquired into. Sin, whom the all-knowing gods called disease, nor was there any need of calling her. With her came her well-known crew, rapine, lust, murder, and torture, fitted out with bull roarers and rattles and other cannibalish instruments.
Satan standing near the muse of the step. Here comes hatred along with self-righteousness. Muse looks up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Looks up and then writes.
Pretending not to be acquainted, but nevertheless hurrying together out of the tavern of vanity, and trundling between them a huge double bass and a small harmonium, on which, as soon as they had unpacked, self-righteousness most obligingly offered to give hatred his right pitch. Hatred, the stupidest of all passions, yet the most cunning in deceits, brought with him a double bass of many strings, shrill and plaintive gut, rasping steel, and growling bronze, and more besides, some strangely comforting in their tone like a rich cordial, although they hardened men to massacre each other.
Death in a hurry.
Yeah. That'll do to begin with, and there are a lot of the orchestra, both virtuous and vicious passions, already within. Heroism will join as soon as we have begun, and it can be dumped anywhere. See? Didn't troop the dancers for a few words for encouragement from your lordship. By the way, you mustn't mind if they address you as Lord of Hosts. They are rather ignorant of everything except my special dances.
Oh, I have so many noms de guerre, my dear ballet master.
Since some of you have your instruments handy, just strike up a bit. You, Widow Fair, and you, Madam Idealism, and you, Hatred, growl on a deep string, not too loud, just a bar or two, no matter what, only to make the nations look up and get over that tiresome mauvais honte of theirs.
The muse writing.
The nations had meanwhile arrived by twos and twos on the top step of the theatre, each brilliant and tidy as ballet dress, which was far better cut and of handsomer stuff, of course, than its everyday broadcloth or rags. And idealism and adventure, hatred and self-righteousness all felt the tuning, for unlike some other members of the orchestra, they were sticklers for correctness.
Enter science and organization. The muse not rising but speaking as he looks around.
Whom have we here? I have never seen either of these before in all of the centuries of my regular attendance at Des Ballets. All other human passions are correctly dressed in allegoric fashion, classical or medieval or biblical, but one of these two newcomers might, for all I see, be a clerk in a public office. And as to the lady, if one may call her such, she seems to be wearing a laboratory smock, let alone spectacles, uncompromisingly literal and modern.
Death jumping down 3 steps with a clatter and flying at the newcomers.
Get out with you! Kick them out! Kick out the newfangled intruders who want to spoil our fun. Knock them down, trample on them. Don't you see they are aliens? Spies. Spies in the service of life and progress.
Satan with an arch angelic gesture which paralyzes uplifted skeleton arm of Death. Hush, hush! Which is your master here, I wonder? Will you never learn manners, you senseless old relic of the Stone Age, with your ramble of instrument fit for ethnological museum? Turns to the newcomers. Excuse his country manners, dear Madam Science, and dear Counselor Organization. You may know the ways of skeletons. Their skulls are inevitably empty. The muse writing.
The two newcomers carried newfangled instruments and fell to unpacking them. Science, a handy gramophone, and Organization, a miniature pianola with its various rollers.
Science zegt, do not mention it, my lord. Cuissez comprendre. C'est tout pardonner. So it is part of my professional duty to find excuses for your ballet master's very interesting primitiveness. Kan jij Organization doen?
Yeah. It's all as it should be. And of course, there's no denying that Science and I are permanently on a staff of Life in Progress. But that firm is working slack at present, so we feel at liberty to take a brief temporary engagement elsewhere.
The muse writing.
Satan extended both hands in welcome, and Science snatched the opportunity of hurriedly verifying whether or not they were furnished with claws.
Satan, low to Science and Organization. Nothing could be more conducive to the success of our ballet, and I only hope our collaboration may have grown permanent. You see, Death is getting a bit old for his job, and dreadfully prejudiced. Besides, I fear I can't be denied that both of you have done one or two things calculated to rub him the wrong way, and then everything is so dreadfully exaggerated by the daily press. Come here, you peppery old ballet master, and salute the lady and gentleman prettily. Places one hand above Death's head, and playfully twitches his arms and legs like a marionette on a string for the amusement of Science and Organization. That's right, now shake hands with this illustrious couple who will keep up our ballet with their wonderful mechanical instruments when the rest of our classic band have neither strings nor wind left. And now you had better so far unbent as to tell me how you intend the members of your orchestra to sit once we are all in the theatre, and also give a few last instructions to all our excellent and obliging performers. Is all the orchestra here? Let me see the list of them, dear Cleo. This is work for you, like Homer's catalogue of ships. Please read out the list of the passions constituting the famous orchestra called patriotism. The muse reading the list as he calls each name its owner makes obedience to Satan.
Greed and loyalty, chivalry, comradeship, reverence, discipline, routine, ennui, egotism, prejudice, pugnacity, bullying. Those are already in a theatre with their instruments. Justice, there she comes. August, stern daughter of the gods, and, I may add, most successfully got up like her own statue, the one of blood-colored porphyry on that pillar in Florence.
Exactly, says Satan. Her falcation draws ready to decapitate someone who she cannot see, and that neat bandage on her eyes making her unaware of what she weighs out in her scales with such unerring muscular precision. I have a genuine regard for justice, Cleo.
Idealism and adventure.
They will sit with some of those already inside. Loyalty plays first fiddle to discipline second. Reverence is the alto and routine the bass of the quartet. Ennui is, of course, waiting for adventure.
Self-righteousness?
On the same side as justice, idealism, chivalry, comradeship, prejudice, and pugnacity, but see that self-righteousness to be on no account separated from hatred, whom she has to keep up with the pitch. Egotism, bullying, jealousy, and cruelty will sit next to him.
Science and organization.
They must be given distinguished seats a little apart.
Statecraft,
That is our deaf prompter. He is in his little box.
widow fear with suspicion and panic, sin with rapine, murder, lust, and torture.
In a corner well to themselves. They are never very presentable and soon will be drunk. Many thanks, Cleo. Deaf fusses for a moment in and out, hurrying the performers into their places. Cleo snatches the opportunity of coming close to Satan and saying in a concatenately imploring whisper,
Dearest Lord Satan, in recognition of our ancient friendship and of the tiny share of collaboration with which you honor me, forgive me if I venture to implore you on my own behalf and that of my friends. Be so appreciative ages to come.
any request of yours is granted beforehand, Cleo, except the one you are about to make. You want me to abolish the regulation all this time and change, by which none of the dancing nations and myself can hear the music of the orchestra of passions. Is that it?
It is indeed. And dearest Lord Satan, forgive my importunity if I venture to say that ever since always it has been too frightfully tantalizing to look on at the dancing without hearing a sound.
I have allowed you to hear Harrison's triumphant voice. Let that be sufficient. His music is worth hearing.
Don't think me ungrateful or unappreciative. Of course, heroism singing is quite exceptionally good, but it's always the same, Konu, Archie Konu, as the critics say. Besides, it isn't he who really makes the music which is being danced to, and it is very hard upon the muse of history to have to provide little musical motifs, always elevating, of course, but rather tame and palm them off as the real things for the ages to come. The presence of science and organization led me to hope that some modern contrivance might at least.
No, Cleo, no, and you may thank your stars this law of mind and matter admits of no inflectation. Believe me, could history know the true strains of which set and keep the nations dancing, the folly and the frenzy which move those limbs, there would soon be an end to your well-deserved popularity. Besides, if more than the faintest echo of my band's playing reached any ears than those of Satan and his poor crazed dancers, it is upon the cards that its grotesque, alluringly heart-rending horror might disincline prosperity for all such entertainments. So let us drop the subject, my dear good muse. Now, Ballet Master Deaf, have you any last instructions? Deaf bowing obsequiously to Satan.
Just one or two, my lord.
Turns to the performers.
Ladies and gentlemen, allied nations of my corps de ballet, and ever responsive passions of the orchestra so justly admired under the name of patriotism. Let me remind you that for the satisfaction of our stage lessee, my lord Satan, and the admiration, I trust, of our enlightened patrons, the muse of history and the ages to come, you are about to take part in the vastest and most new-fashioned spectacle of slaughter and ruin I have so far had the honor of putting on to the world stage. Although I hope that its attractions may cause it to become only the first and only the least considerable of a long and incessant series of similar glorious exhibitions of what mankind can do under my guidance. As regard instructions, you really require none. The nations have of late years concentrated all their educational resources on this sole object, and the human passions, however self-engrossed and often at loggerheads, are always eager to accept the unique opportunity for untrammeled manifestation of their violence, which is afforded by the symphonies of patriotism. Once fairly started, the dancing nations can all be trusted to obey the baton of ballet master Deaf, and, as to details, the more each one departs from the regulation steps, the more intelligently will dancers of the opposite side respond to his improvisations. My ballet belonging essentially to the category of art called imitative. As to the music, I need scarcely impress upon each of the passions to keep strictly to his or her inner part, and never be put out by the dissonances and conflicts and rhythms produced by the contradictory parts of this fellow performance. Such incoherence conduces to the volume and impressiveness of the patriotic whole, and is rendered acceptable to the most fastidious ear by the perfection of the national. There's a motive.
Yeah, unisons.
Unisons?
Yeah.
Alright. The perfection of the national unisons and the constant recurrence of some favorite sentimental theme. The grand plan of a ballet is so simple that no rehearsals have been necessary, and its variety arises out of the ever-increasing number and incompatibility of the allied dances and their characteristic manners. In obedience to the high ethical taste of modern times, the main motive of a performance is that of each disinterested and indignant nation seeking only to repel the aggression of its vis-a-vis and to uphold the eternal rules of justice and humanity. There are subsidiary themes of outstanding dancers flying to the rescue of the presumable victors, not without some delicate hesitation as to which to join. Likewise of main groups overcoming the coyness and unwilling dancers and unveiling them to their terrific mazes. And as the performance proceeds, there may be some graceful furtive attempts at pas de deux between dancers of opposite sides, and some very entertaining figures of the sort we dancing masters call, oh, mijn Frans niet zo goed, chasé, croisé.
Chasé croissant. Ik weet het ook niet optekenen. Ja, jagen of zo.
I guess, yeah. One last recommendation, but all important. Let me remind the passions about to take their seats in the orchestra of patriotism that the duration of a performance depends entirely on their activity. Not all the training of the best trained nations, not all the goodwill of poor ballet master Def, nay, not the sovereign command of Satan in person, could keep our ballet going if the music of the passions were to stop. The members of the Orchestra of Patriotism are therefore urgently requested to replenish their energies by unstinting use of the appropriate refreshments, carefully warmed up commonplaces and fiery dreams of eloquence, which will be handed round unceasingly by Lord Satan's lackeys of the present pulpit. And now, we may all take our appointed places in the theatre of the world.
The passions, grasping or trundling their instruments, go up the theatre steps and enter it by a small side door marked to the orchestra. The dancing nations ascend the same steps but remain standing on the topmost deployed waiting for orders. Ballet Master Def collects his notes and his baton is going to follow them when he is stopped by Satan. Good gracious, we seem all to have forgotten heroism. He isn't even on the list. Shall we ask the muse to rout him out? He is accustomed to her.
Heroism? Oh, I always leave him to himself. He comes as soon as he hears the music, and he can always be squeezed in anywhere. That's the advantage of his being blind. It makes him the most obliging and least troublesome of all of my orchestra. Quite a different pair of boots from struck-up preachers like idealism and chivalry and so forth, who are afraid of rubbing shoulders with the lower passions. Heroism, bless him, won't mind sitting cheek by jowl, even with fear, that filthy slut, or surrounded by the cannibal rout of sin. And here he comes.
The muse writing.
At that moment there entered heroism, with limbs like a giant's, blushes like a girl's, and eyes like a merry child's, but which saw not.
Welcome, heroism, our prince of tenors, goes out to meet heroism and offers to lead him, but heroism waves him off. Satan pretends not to notice the snub, and with sham cordially, we were just saying, my accomplished young friend, that you are the most modest and reliable of our orchestra, ready for everything. Why, I remembered my French Revolution ballet, when heroism and panic played not only a duet, but at the same instruments, 4 hands. The muse not writing, but joining enthusiastically in the conversation.
What a ballet that was! Ballet Master Def's masterpiece, and yours, my Lord Satan, certainly. The splendid tragic irony of the
Yeah, yeah.
of the Marat Robespierre guillotining theme combined with that of Valmy and Liberty.
Yes, dear muse of history, I don't deny that was our greatest hit in modern times. But with goodwill, this new dance of our ballet master Def shall be as full of all manner of terror and irony, and of far vaster dimensions, the whole stage of Europe, not only poultry corner only, not one poultry corner only. Deaf affectionately to heroism.
Come here, my boy. You've always been dutiful and loving to poor old Daddy Death, and cared more for him than for any other dear mortals.
The muse writing.
So saying, the skeleton scarecrow tapped the budding cheeks of heroism, that star-like youth, with eyes which laughed but saw not, for even as his cousin Love, he is blind ever since the cradle. And heroism, at the sound of Death's well-known voice, kissed his bony fingers with rapture, and grasping the drum with which he accompanies himself, modestly took his stance between fear and hatred, unconscious of their foulness.
A bell rings from inside the theatre. Death takes the arm of heroism, who thrills and blushes with joy of the honor. And turning to Satan.
It would be well, my lord, if you would say a few words of encouragement to my corps de ballet.
Satan nods gravely. I will. He solemnly takes up his position opposite of the deployed dancing nations. He folds his great bodiless wings about him so as to form a dalmatic of black radiance, and stands a second or two in a majestic and awful silence. On his right is Death, leaning on the arm of heroism with wide blind eyes. On his left the muse, the ages to come, in a circle all round. Dearly beloved nations, called here therefore brethren in Christ, and henceforth to become true brethren in Satan, receive my blessing with speech you to destruction. Let the light of judgment and of choice be blotted from your minds, and let your clean volutations be submerged and rotted away by the hot and turbid lust of possessions and cruelty welling up from the dark unconscious of your soul. Ye are going forth, O nations, to join Death's dance, even as candid, high-hearted virgins who have been decoyed by fair show into the house of prostitution, where sins they never dreamed of became their daily trade, and whence they dread release because they have kept company with preachers and cutthroats, and become estranged from the honesty of common life. For however pure you enter into it, the dance of ballet master Death brings you to condemnation and barrenness. Moreover, with your dancing I will interrupt the great internal fruitful give and take of life. I will hold up the enriching commerce of different spiritual climates, and the regions of the earth shall cease to be each other's completion. I will forbid the bands of marriage of true minds, and make those born to love one another despise and abhor. Goodness shall cease to call across the earth to goodness, neither shall wisdom stretch helping hands to wisdom, and the sweet affinities of common humanity shall attract no longer. But I will knit together the good which is in every people with its own folly and wickedness, till these grow together as one flesh and one soul. In the fear and hatred which they share, the lucid eye of the spirit shall be bloodshot and blinded. The hand once cunning to give shape and usefulness shall, like the hands of the epileptic, be strong only to strike, wounding itself and others. The mouth whereby men understood each other truth and goodness shall foam out only lies and boast and insults, and the heart shall go out no longer to other hearts, but only melt its self-pity and blaze in vindictiveness. And none of you, O nations, shall know our degradation. The blood of martyrs shall bring forth new executioners, and out of the tears of bereaved women shall arise the slaughter of other sons and other husbands. And every rarest and most needed virtue shall be wasted as a burnt offering upon my altars. The blessing of Satan attend you, who go forth in purity and strength, into return in pollution and enfeeblement. evil be the fruition of your goodness, and chaos the reward of your discipline. Satan raises his hand in benediction. The nations salute with their banners and cry, "Arise, O Lord of hosts." Nice. Inside the theatre of the world, Satan on a raised seat, the muse on a low stool by his side holding her tablets and stylus. Behind her the chorus of ages to come, opposite continuing the semicircle of the pit, a few neutral nations and a number of sleepy virtues among whom, however, pity and indignation are eager and expectant. The passions are seated in front of the stage. In the narrower part of the pit, railed off by a carved balustrade, inscribed patriotism, reserved for members of the orchestra. The stage is closed by a background of August harvest fields at sunset. This is gradually darkened and replaced by the starlit vault, which deepens into a cavern and gradually fills with fire, smoke, rockets, and explosions. Satan, begin your record, Muse of History. The muse rises and writes, standing by the side of Satan's throne, declaiming what he is writing in a clear, impassive voice. The performance on the stage, of course, proceeds in accordance with her spoken description, but a trifle in advance of it, and the muse pauses now and then, resuming her low seat next to Satan in order to allow the action to repeat itself and accumulate.
Now, the beginning of the Ballet of the Nations was as follows. Among the nations appointed by Satan to dance the dance of death, for a few had to be kept to swell the audience, which would otherwise have consisted only of some sleepy virtues in the ages to come, all bodiless and difficult to please. Among these dancing nations there was a very little one, far too small to have danced with the others and particularly unwilling to dance at all, because experience had taught it that the dances of Ballet Master Dev were apt to take place across its prostrate body. This being the case, it was always informed that all it needed to do was to stay quite quiet for the others to dance round. And as it stood there, at the western side of the stage, 2 or 3 of the tallest and finest dancers danced up in a graceful step, smiling, revving their arms and blowing kisses, all of which is the ballet language for "Don't be afraid, we will look after you," and danced away, wagging their finger at a particular one of their vis-a-vis, who was also curtsying and smiling in a most engaging manner on the other side. During this prelude, idealism, self-righteousness, and routine played a few conventional variations on the well-known diplomatic hymn of peace, the music being conducted, so far, not yet by Ballet Master Dev, but by the deaf prompter statecraft, from his little hidden box. And to this music the various nations pirouetted unconcernedly about, although fear, with suspicion and panic, were beginning to whistle, and to clatter that medieval tocsin bell concealed in newspapers. Science and organization were also busy putting rollers into the mechanical instruments. And as the smallest of all the corps de ballet stood quite along in the middle of the western stage, that same tall and wonderfully well-trained dancer sidled up to it with polite gestures of by your leave, and suddenly placing his huge horny paws on the tiny one's shoulders, prepared for leapfrog. But at a sign from Des Baton, and with a hideous crash of all the instruments of Satan's orchestra, and a magnificent note from Heroism's clear voice, the poor smallest dancer of all tripped up that giant and made him reel. But the giant instantly recovered his feet, although his eyes became bloodshot and his brain swam, and, flinging the poor smallest dancer on the floor, he set to performing on his poor little body one of the most terrific pustules that Ballet Master Dev had ever invented, while the vis-a-vis nations danced slowly up till they came to grips over the smallest of all the dancers, who lay prone on the ground, and continued so to lie till the end of the ballet, lifeless between its aggressors and its defenders.
The ages to come burst into shouts of horrified rapture, like spectators at a bullfight. The orchestra subsides for a moment, and only the drum is heard. Satan, low to the muse. Hark! The drum of heroism, and all of the instruments that one I sometimes think of most to my liking. No others had such imperious power over the nerves and muscles, and so little to say to the mind, for the drum knows neither intervals nor modes nor modulation, things required alike for music and rational existence. It recognizes neither resemblance nor diversity, but like the glorious blind boy from it whom it urges on, goes marching, 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 without knowledge of why, whence, or whither. The muse writing and declaiming.
But while this was happening at the western end of the theatre, a symmetrical action had begun at the eastern, where a nation, who had long been forbidden to dance on its own account, because it had been made the slave of some of the others, was being danced across like a carpet by two of the great vis-a-vis, each of whom would point at it with gestures of pity and protection, but without ceasing to trample it, until the two to and fro's of their dance had pounded it out of all shape and almost out of existence.
Deaf rapping on his desk and silencing the orchestra.
Oh, dat ben ik, sorry.
Yeah.
My Lord Satan, interesting neutral nations still in the audience, noble, though somewhat drowsy, virtues who are looking on, and you who reward ballet and ballet master with undying glory, illustrious and bodiless ages to come. These two first figures of our ballet, symmetrical but different in their style of aura, are called the defense of the weak. They will continue unremittingly all through the performance and will lead up to the final triumph of such small nationalities. And they are all cordially pressed to join in the dance, as may have limbs or life to dance with.
The orchestra resumes, and the dancing gets more complicated. No one speaks for a minute or so, till the muse, erect by Satan's side, begins once more her writing and reciting.
For whereas the ballet had begun with the tender radiance of an August sunset above half-harvested fields, where the reaping machines hummed peacefully among the corn stalks, and the ploughs cut into the stubble, the progress of the performance had seen the deepest summer starlit vault flushed by the flare of distant burning farms, and its blue solemnity rent by the fitful tracks of rockets, and the luminous fans of searchlights, and the Roman candles and Catherine wheels of far-off explosions. Until, little by little, the heavens painted such a peaceful blue, were blotted out by masses of flame-lit smoke and poisonous vapors, rising and sinking, coming forward and receding like a stifling fog, but ever growing denser and more rent by dreadful leaping fires, and swaying obedient to death's battle no less than did the bleeding nations of his corpse ballet. In and out of that lurid chasm they moved, by twos or threes, now lost to view in the billows of fiery darkness, now issuing thence toward the ballet master's desk, all suddenly revealed, clasped in terrific embrace by the leaping flame of an exploding magazine, while overhead fluttered in weird great wings, which showered with bomb lightnings. Backwards and forwards moved the nations in that changing play of light and darkness, and undergoing themselves uncertain and fearful changes to aspect.
Interrupting herself.
Stirring page, my Cleo, and one I would on no account have missed the writing of.
Looks at the stage muttering, good, good, then resumes her writing whilst the ballet and the fireworks go on with all kinds of variations. The voice of heroism, a youthful and very pure tenor, is heard above the din of the orchestra, singing the Marseillaise of the accompaniment of his drum. Satan low to the muse, do you hear him, Cleo? He shall be made to sing the other splendid murderous songs by turns, not only this, which spurred the French and Valmy and the bridge of Arcole, but those of the German students who fought at Leipzig, and also the fine theme which dear old Haydn wrote, and Hoffer sang while they led him out to be shot in the moat of Mantua. For, as you are aware, heroism is of no country but of all equally, A real cosmopolitan, although his chief business is in international extermination. A divine genius truly, and appreciated on all hands. The only fault which Satan finds with him, since none of us de Clio are faultless, is that while wasting himself sublimely to no purpose, he is apt to remember the common human nature of all nations, and make them love each other in the midst of their mutual slaughter. But that is a failing of which I trust the present ballet may cure him once for all. The ballet and fireworks go on. Heroism's voice, drowned for a little by the orchestra of passions, is heard once more, singing the first bars of Wacht am Rhein. The muse writing.
Oh, sorry, er kwam ineens wat in beeld.
Ja. Ze onderaan.
So, yeah. Since you should know that, although politicians say the contrary, nations can never die outright. Just as the gods of Valhalla could slash each other to ribbons after breakfast and resurrect for dinner, so every nation can dance death dance, however bled and maimed, dance upon stones or trail itself along, a living jelly of blood and trampled flesh, providing only its head remains unhurt. And that head, which each nation calls its government, but the other nations call France or Russia or Britain or Germany or Austria or Italy for short, that head of each nation dancing death dance, except that the smallest dancer, who never ceased being prostrate on the ground, is very properly helmeted, and rarely gets so much as a scratch, so that, with its innocent stolid face, it can continue to turn towards the ballet master's baton, and order the nation's body to put forth fresh limbs, and even when that is impossible, to keep its stumps dancing ever new figures in obedience or disregard to what are called the rules of the dance. This being the case, death could keep up the dance regardless of the condition of the dancers, and of the condition also of the stage, which was such that, what between blood and mud and entrails and heaps of ravaged properties, it became scarcely possible to move even a few yards to and fro. Yet dance they did, chopping and slashing, blinding each other with squirts of blood and pellets of human flesh, and as they appeared and disappeared in moving wreaths of fiery smoke, they lost more and more of their original shape, becoming, in that fitful light, terrible uncertain forms, armless, legless, recognizable for human only by their irreproachable heads, which they carried stiff and high even while crawling and staggering along, lying in wait, and leaping and rearing and butting as do fighting animals, until they became, with those decorous, well-groomed heads, mere unspeakable hybrids between man and beast. They, who had come onto that stage so erect and beautiful. For the ballet of the nations, when Satan gets it up regardless of expense, is an unsurpassed spectacle of transformations such as must be witnessed to be believed in. Thus one day danced the stranger and stranger antics.
The voice of heroism, after singing bars of Tipperary and other songs, is heard singing with great solemnity Haydn's Gott erhalte unseren Kaiser. Its hymn-like melody gradually changes into part of a psalm. Stand up, O Lord God of hosts, thou God of our fathers, through thee will we overthrow our enemies. In thy name will we tread them under that rise up against us.
And as they appeared by turns in that chaos of flame and darkness, each of those dancing nations kept invoking Satan, crying to him, "Help me, my own dear Lord." But they called him by another name. And Satan, that creative connoisseur, rejoiced in his work of waste and saw that it was perfect.
Put the tablets into the bosom of her robe. Satan in position again of the Michelangelo Duke, as in the prologue, propping his chin on his hand, but with his eyes fixed upon the stage, speaks meditatively to himself. Dear creatures, how they worship me. It is deeply gratifying to my pride in wastefulness, true they mistake my name, but they love my real self, and the success of my long career has taught me the use of aliases to the muse. How true it is, dear muse of history, that the chief function of the sublime in art or nature is to awaken man's slumbering intuition that there is, after all, a power transcending his ephemeral life and quite indifferent to his trumpery happiness. That is one reason why I prefer the Ballet of the Nations to any of the other mystery plays, earthquake, pestilence, shipwreck, and so forth, which Death puts on our stage from time to time. The music is not always pretty, at once too ultra-modern and too archaic for Philistine ears, and despite the classic genius of my ballet master and the sensational suggestions of our new friends, organization and science, the steps of the dance lack variety, but with a scope this ballet gives for moral beauty and how it revives religious feeling in its genuine polytheism. I grant you the heads of the nation are somewhat hard featured, but the bodies of the nations are always sound and virginal. And what concerns me most, their hearts is always in the right place. So for true sublimity, give me, I always say, one of deaf dances danced by nations, each with his heart in the right place and faithfully obedient to whatever may happen to be on its shoulder. The muse, pulling out her tablets, resumes writing.
So, the ballet proceeded. But for this to continue, it was necessary to keep up the music of that orchestra of passions which sat in the enclosure marked patriotism, around the slippery and reeking stage, jealousy, greed, loyalty, chivalry, comradeship, reverence, discipline, routine, ennui, and egotism. Justice, prejudice with pugnacity and bullying, widow fear with her nimble children, suspicion and panic, playing on penny whistles, foghorns, and that medieval tocsin bell in its wrapper of newspapers, idealism and adventure, that splendid pair blowing the silver trumpet and woodland horn, hatred, who never ceased turning up their harmonium of self-righteousness, sin, whom the wise gods call disease, and her classic crew, rapping lust and murder, with their bow roarers and rattles, science and organization seated a little apart, for none of their old established allegory companions could bear their newfangled instruments, but whose gramophone and pianola brayed and strummed away unflaggingly, when all other musicians showed sign of weariness, and only heroism, a smile in its clear blind eyes, found ever fresh breath and ever more jubilant notes. The rest of the band was beginning to flag, either because of the passions, as is notorious, are lacking in endurance, or because they had fuddled themselves with the strong liquor which was unceasingly handed round by Satan's lackeys of the present pulpit. The less noble ones were coming in a little at random, suspicion and panic, notably, screaming at the heads of the nations, and fear, poor slut, being seized with delirium tremens. None of all this was noticed by the dancers, yet they began to dance a little less fiercely, and fell to mistaking their vis-a-vis for partners and vice versa, to the despair of the ballet master, who wheeled from side to side at his desk, hitting the somnolent passions of the orchestra resounding wax, and cracking his fleshless joints like castanets. Now Satan began to fear that the performance might dribble out untimely, for except the voice of heroism and the mechanical instruments of science and organization. The sounds were feeble and intermittent, and the nations were beginning to hold and stumble, and even to curtsy each other, as if the end might be at hand.
Satan to himself, this will never do. Why, we haven't yet come to the figure of famine and insurrection. There yet remain several generations of young lads waiting for slaughter, and an endless stock of virtue to be wasted. Hi, rapine, murder, and lust, dear nimble followers of sin, come to my help, and fetch me 2 new players from out of the audience of sleepy virtues. The muse declaiming very slowly as she writes.
Sleepy indeed they were, and some, like wisdom, equanimity, and temperance, but especially truthfulness, had long since fallen into consoling dreams, after closing their eyes and bunching up their ears against sights and sounds offensive to their principles, but which they had not grit enough to interrupt. But among the virtues too were not asleep, and sat motionless under the spell of hideous fascination, their eyes fixed, their hearing intent with horror almost pleasant in its excess. These two were called Pity and Indignation, sister and brother of divinest breed. She was like waters on the moonlight, and as gentle, murmuring, and lovely, and also, like such waters, dangerous in her innocence. The other golden and vivid as flame, and, like flame, tipped with terrible scarlet, purifying but devastating. To them, who were fascinated with horror before that dance, there sprang at Satan's bidding, rapine, murder, and lust, the crew of Death's mother Paramus Sin, whom the gods call disease and wisdom, and straightway that noble pair of twins, Pity and Indignation, responded to the hideous summons. Hand in hand they leaped from among the sleeping virtues, and flew, on rushing pinions, into the midst of Satan's orchestra. Fear and her brood fell back. Idealism and adventure, well nigh, well nigh spent with breathless blowing of their silvered trumpet and hunting horn, made room eagerly. Heroism, that blind, smiling young giant, recognized at once Pity's delicious healing breath and Indignation's cheery blast. He shook himself, and with renewed vigor his godlike youthful voice sung out words which no one could distinguish but all the world understood. And Sin with her crew fell at the newcomers' feet and fawned upon them. Even before either of that immortal pair had uttered a sound, the flagging dancers, the bleeding nations, weary of that stage, slippery with blood and entrails, felt the wind of the wings of Pity and Indignation, and in its pure breath suddenly revived. The holy pair required no instruments. Pity merely sobbed, and the sobs were like the welling up notes of many harps, drowning the soul in tender madness. But Indignation hissed and roared like a burning granary when the sparks crackle as they fly into the ripe standing harvest, and the flames wave scores of feet high in the blast of their own making.
Satan, intent and meditative, thoughtfully to himself, "This is the supreme sacrifice to me. I am the waster of all kinds of virtue." Death with a gesture of a dawning rapture towards Satan.
Now nothing can stop the dancing, and this shall yet be the greatest triumph of Ballet Master Death.
Raps on his desk.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear simple and valiant nations of course the ballet, we will now proceed to the third and last figure of a dance. It is called Duty to Our Children, Loyalty to Our Dead.
Satan bows benignly towards Death. "You might have trusted Satan, dear Ballet Master Death. Pity and Indignation can renew Death's dance, when all the nations have danced themselves to stumps, and the ordinary band, save perhaps Widow Fear and her children, can fiddle and blow no longer." He raises himself slightly in his seat, radiantly attentive, lifting one hand imperceptibly as in benediction and repeating low to himself, "I am the waster of all kinds of virtue." The ages to come burst into frantic applause, crying, "Encore! Encore!" The muse, holding his stylus and tablets, bows to Satan and says in a clear, quiet voice,
And thus the ballet of the nations is still a dancing.
"Woo! Nice. End of part 2. Ja,
Okay.
ja, dat was deel 2. Ja, te gek. Super. Ja, kleine, is er nog een auteursnoot voor als we het opvoeren, dat het alleen de drums moeten te horen zijn. De war drums, als in Vikings of zo.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, dat je dus niks ziet.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of the music must be audible except the voice of drum and of heroism. Dat is best wel cool, want in Wereldoorlog 1 werd er heel veel gebombardeerd. Dat is uitgezocht hoeveel. Dat is echt per vierkante meter vielen er echt 10 bommen. waarvan er 7 exploderen en 3 niet. En de woorddrum is dan zeg maar alle bommen die je hoort.
Oh,
Die hoort
shit,
van-
oké.
Ja. Super. Ja, dit was hem voor vandaag.
Ja.
Te gek, dankjewel.
Ja, geen probleem.
Nou, precies een uur zijn we bezig.